In this video, we're going to check out I-5, Lost Tomb of Martek. It is the third adventure in a three-part series called The Desert of Desolation by Tracy Hickman, and sometimes a few others. The first two were a hit and a miss, so let's see if Tracy could put the button on the series. Hey everybody, what's up? My name is Mike from D4 Dungeon, and here on this channel we like to save your precious D&D time and dollars by providing you with tips, tools, and product reviews, just like this review here of I-5, Lost Tomb of Martek. So if you're new here, then consider subscribing. While I-5, Lost Tomb of Martek could be a standalone adventure, it was designed to be the third and final chapter in a three-part series called The Desert of Desolation. Chapter 1 of this story was I-3, Pharaoh. I did a review of that earlier, and I'll put a link for it up there. But in this story, our players have been tossed into the desert because they've been kind of naughty, and they were asked to release the desert of Amun-Ra's curse. And on the way to do that, and on the way to the pyramid, they find a bottle with a genie inside it, and they will probably release the genie and Afridi, who is evil, and then goes off and lays waste to the desert, probably leading to the general title of the whole thing, The Desert of Desolation. In Chapter 2 of this story, which is I-4, Oasis of the White Palm, which I did a review of, and I'll just put it up above. But in this chapter, our players are going to have to try to clean up the mess they created in Chapter 1, which is releasing that Afridi. And in order to do this, they find out how to release a powerful Djinn who will go and do battle on their behalf. Now, in the meantime, they also do other things like save Ashik's future and daughter-in-law, but that's basically Chapter 2 in a nutshell. Which brings us to Chapter 3, Lost Tomb of Martek. Now, things didn't go so well as we thought from Chapter 2. The Djinn that our players released actually was pretty evenly matched with the Afridi, and now their battle isn't coming to a quick conclusion, and it is raging across the desert, making an even bigger mess than before. So it doesn't look so good for our players, but we all know that third time's a charm, and this time we're going to get it right. Our players are going to go and find the Sphere of Power, which is found in the Lost Tomb of Martek. And we know that for sure, this sphere will definitely solve the problem once and for all. And so off our players go into the desert looking for the Lost Tomb of Martek with 3 special gems in hand that they found in the previous chapter, and these gems are special because they will unlock Martek's tomb. Our player's journey will take them across the Sky Sea, which is beautiful and deadly all at the same time. Sand that has been so hot it has melted to glass. And when they get to the other side, they will find the Lost Tomb of Martek. Traveling inside, they will meet a group of degenerate inbred paladins and thieves who have been warring with each other forever, and then go through 3 kind of mind-bending, reality-altered, magical realms in order to unlock the final resting place of Martek. And there they will find that the Sphere of Power was never a sphere at all, but it was Martek himself and his Sphere of Power. They resurrect Martek, who, in his infinite power, gives a little snappy snap and solves all of the problems that our PCs have made over the past 3 chapters. Story over. And now on to the specific review of I-5, Lost Tomb of Martek, and each of these 5 categories that we're going to go through is going to get a rating or a score out of 4. As we take a look at the encounters within I-5, Lost Tomb of Martek, we'll start off with the role-playing opportunities, which honestly are limited. Most of them occur in that first level of the tomb, which is the Cursed Garden. There's these paladins and thieves who have been there for generations, and they're kind of warring with each other. There's also 3 NPCs kind of note who have their own sections in the back of the module with backstories and the like, but ultimately, all of these interactions that we're going to have with the NPCs in this area have very little bearing on what happens in the rest of the adventure. Those 3 NPCs may steal the gems, which are the keys to the final resting place for Martek, but even if they do, it will not affect the PC's ability to complete the adventure, because it just means that the NPCs will be the ones unlocking the doors for the players as they go through. And while there is a general lack of role-playing opportunities for our players, there is a fair decent amount of combat encounters that our players can partake in. A lot of undead, they could be fighting with the degenerates from the Cursed Garden, but I think what bothers me the most about our combat encounters is that we are kind of robbed of that final battle that we all like to have in an adventure. That uncertain outcome of whether or not the players are going to beat the big bad. And in this adventure, there is no final combat encounter. It's just get to release or resurrect Martek and let him save the world from the player characters. So it's a bit of a letdown. And when it comes to problem-solving encounters, which have been in no short supply all throughout the Desert of Desolation series, once again we find them the same thing here, except for that I5's problem-solving encounters are considerably lackluster or easy. And I'm thinking of, in particular, the Black Abyss, which is one of the three kind of main challenges that the players have to go through to get to the end. In this one, although the concept is really cool, where we have time and speed of everything is kind of warping and changing as they go through, other than that kind of neat game dynamic, they just walk to the end, grab the thing they need to do, and come back again. And there is 1/3 of the challenges for the entire adventure. And that kind of theme of either easy step-like or no problem solving is carried out through the entire adventure. Now, there is one encounter of note, and that would be the Mobius Tower. It's one of the 3 challenges that the players go through, and inside it, all the NPCs are frozen in time, and there seems to be some kind of assassination attempt of assault and underway. And it's 4 levels tall, and when you try to get to the 5th level from the 4th, you go back to the 1st, and it just kind of cycles like that. It's a really neat premise, mostly well executed. There are these weird, not weird, but they are undead that are the combat encounters within it, and it is a little bit odd that they are not frozen in time, but overall, it was probably the highlight of the adventure. And so for this category, I gave it 2 out of 4 stars. Looking at motivations for the monsters and NPCs, we find that there are 3 areas where our players can interact with NPCs. There's the Cursed Garden, there's the Crypt of Al-Alisk, and there's also the Mobius Tower. Now, the Cursed Garden we talked a little bit about. There are some groups there that have some collective backgrounds and motivations, but not a heck of a lot. And then the other 2 areas, the Tower and the Crypt, do have NPCs with some kind of written background, but the chance of the players ever being able to interact with them is actually very, very slim. So it's like he added in the backgrounds, but with no intent of the players ever really being able to use them or interact with these NPCs. Now, there are those 3 special NPCs with backgrounds and motivations found in the appendix. They first appear in the Cursed Garden, and they will try to steal those special gems or keys from the player characters. And if they succeed, then you are chasing them for the rest of the adventure, and if they fail, then those NPCs just stay where they are. But in any event, there is still a bit of a letdown, because even when they do what they're supposed to do, they take off, and then you end up just chasing them for the rest of the adventure. And so for motivations of NPCs and monsters, I could only give this category 1 out of 4 stars. Now, as we take a look at the logical layout of this adventure, sometimes too logical is also a bad thing. This is a very straightforward A to B to C and so on type adventure where there's very little opportunity to fall off the rails. And if you just read the clues on the pillars, and as you kind of go through, you know what you got to do next, and then you know what you got to do next, and then you find out what you got to do next, and you can kind of just see where this is going. It is logical, yes, but it's boring logical. And within these logical, kind of boring A, B, C, and so on, there's a lot of illogical leaps that the players are going to have to make too. There's very little information that they can find that will help them prepare for the next stage of their challenge or of their journey. It feels like a series of non sequiturs kind of slapped together. And so for this category, I gave it 2 out of 5 stars. Looking at writing quality, this has usually been something that Tracy Hickman has done well at, especially in I4 Oasis, where I talked about the story being very compelling and having lots of elements in it that drive our players through the entire adventure in an interesting way. However, this seems to be completely absent in this story. There is very little to drive the players through the adventure story-wise, except for the fact that they need to basically fix the mess up that they've done over the past 2 adventures. It is very lackluster. And the text boxes that are provided for the DM to read to the players are well done and well written, but sometimes almost too well written, with so many adjectives and adverbs that they become completely distracting for the players. And finally, I just want to talk about the tone changes that occur throughout this adventure. We start off with the Sky Sea, where it's dirty and gritty and serious. As we travel across to the tomb, we get to the garden, where we have this almost comical, whimsical tone with the degenerate inbred paladins and thieves. And then from there, we move on to the 3 layers of magical chaos, where it almost switches to the absurd. And these changes are so dramatic and so extreme that it feels like I'm getting a tone whiplash. And so for the category where Tracy Hickman usually does so well, I can only give I5 1 out of 4 stars. When we take a look at the ease to run as a DM, certainly this adventure is easier to run than a lot of them, especially when it's very railroady and we're going from A to B to C. There's not a lot of thinking that the DM has to do on the fly when you can have a sandbox adventure. So it is easier in that respect. Also, this adventure comes with all of those nice maps that we've seen in the Desert of Desolation series, and they're on the sleeve, so they're easy to pull out and read and take a look at while you're DMing the adventure. Plus, each of these encounters are divided into those sections that we've seen throughout the entire series that help you find the information that you need when you're running each encounter. There are still some issues with those sections in that you will find a beneficial NPC listed as a monster and then later on as a character, and that can be a little bit confusing, but overall the package of ease to run as a DM is generally well done. And so for our last category, I was able to give it 3 out of 4 stars. So overall, when we take a look at I5 Lost Tomb of Martek, there may be a number of very creative elements added in here by Tracy Hickman, but overall, I feel like they were poorly executed and tied together. I think the Mobius Tower is probably the best part of this adventure, and I would have loved to spend more time there and seen that section alone fleshed out a little bit more. And if at nothing else, you could take this tower and make it the centerpiece for an entire adventure of your own. And the Sky Sea was another great element that I think was never really fully brought to realization within this adventure. And once again, if nothing else, you could take the Sky Sea and make it another focal point for an adventure of your own creation. But those are just 2 great elements in what is otherwise a sea of lackluster encounters. And let's not forget the fact that this adventure is very railroady and takes us right to a very disappointing end where our characters are nothing more than D&D dogs, fetching a powerful NPC to solve all of the problems. And unfortunately, it makes for an entirely upsetting and disappointing end to a 3-series arc. And so overall, I gave Tracy Hickman's I5 Lost Tomb of Martek 1.5 stars out of 4. I hope you enjoyed this adventure review of I5 Lost Tomb of Martek, and if you did, then hit that like button down below. And if you want more tips, tools, and product reviews just like this one, you can find the subscribe button right over there, or you can find some other videos of ours on this side, including other adventure reviews from the Desert of Desolation series. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video.